Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canadiens Connection Podcast, right here on Rocket Sports Radio, where we keep you informed, engaged, and entertained as we talk about what's new this week with the Montreal Canadiens. And we've got a great show coming up for you today, as well as an exclusive interview that you are not going to want to miss. This is episode 350 of the Canadiens Connection Podcast. Put out some fireworks for that. That's tremendous. Episode 350, which is entitled Inside Laval's Playoff Run. Yeah, they're still going. Who's the Habs' most impressive prospect? Ooh, that sounds like a good one. And I'm going to have lots to talk about with my wonderful co-host, who's also the founder and president here at Rocket Sports. His name is Rick Stevens. Rick, congratulations on 350 episodes.
Oh, it's wonderful. 350 episodes since we launched the Canadiens Connection podcast, and that was 6 years ago, and built upon the Habs 360 podcast. We've had a podcast on Rocket Sports going back every Saturday, going back to 2012. So yeah, we've been doing this a while.
Saturdays.
That's a lot of Saturdays. That's a lot of coverage and a lot of connections, and that's why we call it the Canadiens Connection, because we've got lots of connections throughout the NHL for sure, but also the AHL. And you said we're going inside Laval's playoff run. Well, to go inside, you need an insider, and we have, the ultimate insider, the AHL guru, on our podcast today, and we're happy to have him back on the show.
Absolutely. We'll tell you a bit about that in just a second, because that will be our big topic of the week, which we will hit in segment 2. But before we get there, there is actually lots to catch you up on in news surrounding the Montreal Canadiens this week and the rest of the NHL. So we're going to get you caught up on some of those things. There is some... While there's not roster news, there are some roster rumblings that we definitely need to discuss and share with you. So we're going to get you some speculation and some rumblings that are happening regarding the Canadiens roster. The prospect report, still a pretty deep prospect report, as there is some news about some of the top prospects in the Canadiens organization. And as we said, Laval is still deep in their playoff run, as are the Trois-Rivières Lions in the ECHL. They are very deep in their playoff run. We're going to get you caught up on all of that information, as well as some pretty significant news from around the NHL. So really exciting first segment for you. Lots to talk about. And then in our second segment, as I said, it's our big topic, AHL Insider. Which Habs prospect is the one to watch in Laval this postseason? We are taking a deep dive into the Laval Rocket and their Calder Cup playoff run. They're entrenched in the Eastern Conference final right now, and we're going to talk all about how they got there, how it's going for them, and which of the Montreal Canadiens prospects are really propelling the action on that team. And we have a very exclusive, very special interview that you're not going to want to miss that talks all about that.
If you're a fan of the Montreal Canadiens, you'd better be a fan right now of the Laval Rocket. Or if you're not following the Rocket, just leave it to us, and we'll bring you what the Canadiens prospects are doing, and prospects that you might see rather soon in a Montreal Canadiens uniform.
That is very true. Of course, then we're going to wrap up today's show. We had a bevy of responses to last week's fan question, our Canadiens Connection question of the week. We had a whole pile of responses from some of our frequent commenters, as well as some new names and faces chiming in as well, which we're always really happy to see. So we've got some great responses to share with you, and we have a pretty good question for you to answer this week as well. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. That also, of course, means if you're new around here, we like this to be an interactive podcast. So we want to hear from you, whether it's a question, whether it's an answer to our fan question of the week, or if you just have a comment, if you have a question that you'd like us to answer, if you have something to say about the Montreal Canadiens, we want to hear from you. So drop us a text anytime, 24/7 on our Rocket Sports text line, which is 585-3-ROCKET. Again, 585-3-ROCKET. You can also drop a comment on YouTube. If you are not following us on our YouTube channel, just head to InsideTheCanadiens.com. That'll take you right there. Subscribe and drop a comment on the latest Canadiens Connection video. And
if you're listening on YouTube, put a like there as well. That really helps.
It does.
Us get out to more fellow Canadiens fans.
That's right. And of course, you can always drop us a comment or an answer on social media at Habs Connection on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We definitely want to hear from you. So in terms of what's happened since we last met a week ago, it's the quiet season in terms of kind of goings on. But the one thing that we do know is that a report came out this past week about what Ivan Demidov is up to this summer. He certainly took it easy to kick off his offseason, heading down to Punta Cana with his girlfriend. But it seems like it's going to be very work-focused for young Demidov for the remainder of the summer now that he's had his vacation down on the beach.
On the Dominican Republic beaches.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to remain in Montreal for the summer. He's going to remain in Montreal to train at Brassard, to adjust, he and his girlfriend, to North American life and to immerse himself in the rich culture of the city. So how do you do that? What's your first stop? Well, your first stop is going down to Paramount Leasing and leasing yourself a 2025 Audi RS6. Of course, that's what everybody does.
Naturally.
Yeah. He looks good in that super nice sports car. And that gets his summer off on the right start, for sure.
I would think so. But I like when the young prospects choose to come to Montreal for the summer to train, because they can get acclimated not only with the city, but really start to feel at home at the practice complex out at Brassard, and really just kind of start to meet and bond more with any of the guys who are local to Montreal, who stay in the Montreal for the summer, that type of thing. So I think that's a great choice for young Demidov.
For sure. He's going to be guided by the Canadiens training staff, probably both on ice sessions and getting him into a nutrition program, and all the different aspects of that, treating any bumps and bruises he might have in Brassard. Certainly he's embracing the city. The fans have embraced him, and now you see the corporate side getting on board as well.
Definitely. So that's the scoop on young Ivan Demidov. But when we turn to roster news, boy, is the rumor mill ramping up this week as some of the insiders from the NHL start to get some hints and clues and whatnot as far as what might start happening here in the offseason. First up, we have a report from Frank Saravelli that Nashville Predators' Jonathan Marchessault is open to being traded this summer. And are you surprised that Montreal is where he'd like to go?
Yeah, how nice for Jonathan.
Yeah.
How nice.
Yeah.
That let's remind everybody that Kent Hughes reached out to him. He was an unrestricted free agent last season. Kent Hughes made an offer. Jonathan Marchessault said, no, thank you. And took a longer term with the Nashville Predators. Not terribly happy. He aired some beefs about the coach Andrew Burnett, and is said that he's open to moving out of Nashville now, bringing with him his contract, the term of which is too long for the Montreal Canadiens. Let me just say that.
And too expensive.
And so he wants to come to the Canadiens now. I think it's too late. He had his chance. The Canadiens went with Plan B and made the trade for Patrick Laine, and the Patrick Laine on a 2-year contract which fits what the Canadiens want to do. I know there's lots of media and fans beating the drum about this, that somehow Marchessault as a 40-goal scorer hasn't been that for a bit. He's more realistically a 20 to 25 goal player. 34 years old, 5'9", doesn't really fit with what Gordon said, that they want size. This past year, 21 goals, 35 assists, 56 points in 78 games, minus 29. That was second worst on the Predators. And he has 4 more years at $5.5 million going to the end of the 2028-29 season.
No,
that
thank you.
Does not fit with the Montreal Canadiens window as a bridge player. So just because a francophone player said, I want to be on the Montreal Canadiens, the Canadiens maybe at one time would have been desperate enough to have to go in his direction. But I think it would be a firm no. Thank you very much, though.
I think that would be the better hockey decision, to say
absolutely
thanks but no thanks.
Yeah.
We're gonna continue on here.
And let's not forget that it wasn't that long ago that Marchessault was talking about he would come and play a couple of games a season, maybe one game a season when he was in Vegas, and Marchessault complained about playing under the microscope in Montreal. There was so much media pressure, and that he had to have the perfect game every time he showed up in Montreal. So not exactly the ideal player.
No, I don't think so. This next piece of news is one that I do find, I think it's a really happy story, and I also think it could be very interesting. Pierre LeBrun reporting that Pat Brisson, the very well-known player agent, Pat Brisson has informed Pierre LeBrun that Jonathan Toews is back in business. He's committed to returning to the NHL this fall. Brisson happy to start taking calls now from teams leading up to free agency on July 1st. And this is just take out could this be an avenue that Kent Hughes explores aspect for a second. I just think for what Jonathan Toews has gone through and how long he has been out of playing hockey, I think it is spectacular that he has remained committed to pushing himself to get back to this point and seems to be ready to make the leap back into the NHL.
LeBrun says, quote, Toews, 37, last played in April 2023. He's been working out the last several months to get him ready for a comeback, end quote. It's a wonderful story.
It is.
A wonderful story. So, what do we got? 37-year-old, certainly has size, 6'2", and he's got leadership all over the place.
Yes, he does.
He's growing up in Winnipeg. He has French as a second language, which some will find important. His last season in the league for the Chicago Blackhawks, that was 2022-23, 15 goals, 16 assists, 31 points in 53 games, and a minus 31. My question, I have a couple of questions, I guess. Can he be a second line center? The Canadiens, this doesn't work if he's not a second line center.
That's right.
The Canadiens have a whole lot of bottom six players that they're going to have to accommodate. Does he have the ability to return and, after being out so long, to establish himself as a second line center? Was he a second line center when he left? All of those are question marks. You kind of see a situation where you'd sign him on a PTO and then, see him in camp and then offer a contract. But I think there's going to be other teams that are going to be able to or want to offer him a contract because they're a little more flexible than the Canadiens. They can see him slotting in as a second line center, as a third line center. And for Taves himself, 37, he's making a comeback. He's putting in all this work to try and come back. Is he going to want to come to the Canadiens who aren't in the contender window right now? Or will he want to go to some team who
has a chance,
is a contender right now, like the team of his birth in Winnipeg? The only other thing I'll mention is if this gives an opportunity to get Kirby Dach on track, given their relationship and the respect that Dach has for Taves, I can understand that aspect a little bit. But you got to be fairly confident that Kirby Dach is capable of reaching his potential. And I'm not sure that's the case. So lots of question marks in there. I don't think it's a natural fit for both sides necessarily.
And I don't either. I should clarify by saying, as excited as I am for the personal side of this, I did say, take the Montreal Canadiens factor out of it. I think it's a great human interest story, just great sports story for a very respected athlete that he's made his way back. I don't think that he's going to be a Montreal Canadian.
And just one last thing. I said one last thing, but one more last thing. It's nice to bring in a player who can spark a Kirby Dach, but and I know that Gorton said they want to bring in players who have size, skill, and compete and all that. But the number one factor in bringing in somebody for your second line is the ability to play with Ivan Demidov. To not only play with him, but to bring him to reach his potential, to bring out the best in Demidov. That should be the number one criteria in going to find somebody for your second line, is bringing out the best in Demidov, because that's not only this season, that's forever, or at least as a bridge until that Michael Hage or whoever comes in. That should be the primary motivation when you're looking for someone. And so is that, there's other names out there. Nikolai Ehlers, is he the creative kind of person that can unlock, maybe not as far as size and grit and all that sort of thing, but is he the kind of creative person? I don't know that he's the perfect fit either. But I think we need to keep that in mind when we're evaluating all of these players who are available or have expressed an interest in Montreal.
I think it will be very fascinating to see where Taves does land. And certainly I'll be keeping an eye on his progress wherever he does end up. Lastly, in this segment, in terms of the rumors, now this is one I'm going to say right out of the gate. Kent, just please step away from the phone. Step away from the phone. Chris Johnston on Friday suggesting that Kent Hughes is willing to trade one of their first-round picks. I'm fine with that if he wants to do that. It's the second part I don't love. And he's also open to possibly moving defenseman Logan Mailloux, quote, in the right deal. And I, for one, think that would be the wrong move to make. Logan Mailloux has had a lot of success at the AHL level. And I'm sorry, I know that you have a David Reinbacher as well, waiting in the wings. I am not completely convinced yet on David Reinbacher at the NHL level, but Logan Mailloux is a big You want to talk about size, grit, compete, skill. You have an offensive puck-moving defenseman who is a right-handed defenseman who also plays on an edge and uses his size to play a physical game. I think at this stage you don't get rid of him. You don't trade him until you figure out if he is going to be an asset at the NHL level for you yet or not. That's my 2 cents before I turn this over to Rick.
Yeah, this is Chris Johnson put this out on The Athletic, his NHL offseason trade board. And as you go through, he's got Chris Kreider on top, Marco Rossi. And some fans are talking about Marco Rossi's. The size is an issue there. Bowen Byron with the Sabres as number 3, Rasmus Anderson with Calgary, John Gibson. That rounds out your top 5. Keandre Miller, the Rangers apparently are willing to part ways with him as number 6. So you go on and on and on. Marchessault is number 9 on this list. Number 8, he says, a Montreal Canadiens first-round pick, as you mentioned. And you got to go all the way down, scroll down to number 19. So Chris Johnson, by putting there, doesn't feel, I guess, that there's a high probability of this happening, but has Logan Mailloux at number 19. And he says the Canadiens' cupboards are overflowing with promising young defensemen, which makes the path a little crowded. While he's certainly not a player Montreal has to move, the belief is he could be had in the right deal. And he goes on to say that he played a big role for the Laval Rocket this season, got a brief taste in the NHL. All of what you mentioned. Logan Mailloux is a big puck-moving defenseman, high compete, high grit.
He's got a great shot.
An exceptional shot, which the Canadiens do not have from the point right now on the power play. They do not. Lane Hudson, Mike Matheson, they don't have a shot at the power play. Great skater, good skill. His issues are inconsistency in his own zone, although he's made strides there as well this past season. What can you teach? Can you teach size?
No.
Can you teach a shot? Can you teach compete and play with a grit and an edge? And can you teach defensive zone coverage?
Yes, all day, every day.
I think you can. And as you said, David Reinbacher, one of the things that I'm surprised at Chris Johnston, he said the cupboards are overflowing with good young defensemen. On the right side? What he's missed is the Canadiens don't have a plethora of them on the right side, lots on the left. And they're going to need some of those. David Reinbacher for sure, and I know the Canadiens put a priority on David Reinbacher and believe that he can, reach his potential, and have carefully managed, his return after his surgery, and has he made up time, his lost development time? Yeah, I think so. And has he looked good in the playoffs at times? Has he played every playoff game? Yes, but there's still the question mark of whether he can handle a regular NHL load. And you don't want to put all your chips in on one right-handed defenseman. I think, as you said, Logan Mailloux has to be there, has to be a priority.
I think so.
And it would have to be a pretty darn big return if you're going to part ways with a Logan Mailloux.
And I'll just add, if it's okay, one other thing that you actually mentioned when we were discussing this before we started recording the podcast today, and that is whether or not David Reinbacher is a little too injury prone, because injuries have been an issue for him. And so is that a gamble that you want to take if you part ways with a Logan Mailloux? And again, as you say, not putting all of your eggs in one basket on the right-hand side, and then you end up with perhaps a very good potential skilled player in David Reinbacher, but can he stay healthy?
Want to add another intangible? that some people find important. His French is excellent. And Mayu, yeah.
Yes.
If you've been, for those fans who have paid attention to the Laval Rocket, at times that Place Belle during the season, the Mayu chants in Place Belle have been pretty loud. He's a popular player.
Mm-hmm.
He can be that as well for the Montreal Canadiens. So taking all of those things into account, you got to be real, raise an eyebrow to the fact that, according to Chris Johnston, that the Canadiens are willing to include him in the right deal.
Put your phone on Do Not Disturb, Kent. Put your phone on Do Not Disturb. All right. Well, if we're talking about Laval and the prospects, let's take a quick dip into the Habs prospect report.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world.
Young Ivan Demidov simply cannot stay out of the headlines, and in this case, once again, it's a good thing. Ivan Demidov, we mentioned a week ago, he was one of 3 finalists to be named Rookie of the Year for the KHL this season. Well, he went ahead and won it. Ivan Demidov, Rookie of the Year for the KHL this past year. That's a tremendous accolade for him.
We told you last week that he was one of 3 nominees. Really, was there any question? Absolutely, the KHL's Rookie of the Year. There was bumps during that season when he wasn't getting ice time, but he still managed to be the top scorer on that St. Petersburg team, and in the process set a KHL record. So not a surprise, but congratulations to Ivan Demidov, Rookie of the Year in the KHL.
Absolutely.
And I should mention, will be eligible for the Calder next season.
That's right.
In the NHL.
Absolutely. Former Canadiens prospect Jesse Ylönen heading back over to Europe. He has signed, and I say that with I'm sad to see Jesse Ylönen leave North American hockey. I believe that he could have with the right team had some more success here, but also happy for him that he has signed a 2-year contract in the SHL with Djurgårdens. And congratulations to him for that. He'll probably enjoy being closer to family and where he grew up and so forth. But Jesse Ylönen, 2-year contract in the SHL with Djurgårdens.
With Tampa and Nashville this past season, organizations played for the Crunch and the Admirals. 35 points in 66 games. And I think he gets an opportunity to spend 2 years in the SHL, and who knows? His path to the NHL is not necessarily over after that time.
The CHL's Memorial Cup continues, being hosted by Rimouski in Quebec by the Rimouski Oceanic. Don't forget, it's the Oceanic hosting. The WHL team is the Medicine Hat Tigers, the OHL team, the London Knights, and the Q team, the Moncton Wildcats. And it's teeing up to be an interesting final on Sunday.
Yeah, Memorial Cup final on Sunday. Medicine Hat Tigers from the WHL cruised to that final with a 3-0 record. Friday night, the London Knights had to beat Moncton, and they did so 5-2 to earn their place in Sunday's final. So it will be Medicine Hat Tigers versus the London Knights. And the Knights, they suffered their only loss to the Tigers 3-1 in the round robin finale. It's going to be a really good game. London is stacked. 12 NHL draft picks, 4 first-rounders, and Medicine Hat has been playing exceptionally well. Check it out on Sunday.
Definitely. What else are you going to want to check out on Sunday? Well, I hope you have a subscription to Flow Hockey so that you can watch the Laval Rocket. They are in the midst of their Eastern Conference Finals, so yes, that does mean that they won their division final series last Sunday with a stomping 5-0 victory over the Rochester Americans. Caden Primo with the shutout, making 27 out of 27 saves. Goals by Barry Boulay, Sean Farrell, Lucas Condata, Joshua Waugh, Oliver Kapanen. So Laval won that best-of-5 division title series 3-2. And then things shifted on Wednesday to Columbus. Columbus. I always want to say Columbus. It's Charlotte. To the Charlotte Checkers. And I'm not going to really give you a ton of details about this because we're going to go in depth about this series coming up with our exclusive AHL Insider interview in the next segment. But
just to preview, because we know that fans may not be following the AHL all season. Laval was first overall in the AHL. And Charlotte, who they are the AHL affiliate of the Florida Panthers, they were fourth overall. So those two teams will meet for the Eastern Conference Final. On the West, there's a Canadian team there as well, Abbotsford, and they'll meet Texas in the Western Conference Final.
That's right. So they've already played the first two games of the Eastern Conference Final series. Both were in Laval. The Checkers have come out on top on both of those games. We're going to get into those details, as I said, in the next segment. Some interesting things that we're not going to talk about in the next segment that we'll mention now. Jeff Gorton and John Sedgwick were at the first game in that series on Wednesday night in Laval, so they were taking in the prospects to see how they were performing. And also, interestingly, in between, the funny thing, we're going to talk about scheduling, but they played back-to-back nights. Game 1 and 2 was Wednesday and Thursday, and in the course of that time, Laval released a couple of their Habs prospects who were there on tryout contracts, Tyler Thorpe and Owen Protz, and they've signed a goaltender, Vincent Duplessis, to a PTO. So doing a little bit of roster shuffling in the Eastern Conference Final, and we're going to get into all the details on what's going on with that series and what's coming up next.
And just before you say, oh my God, what's happening with Primo and Fowler, nothing. They're fine. It's just for the playoffs, having a third goaltender.
That's right.
Around, and it appears that Connor Hughes is headed home because he signed that 5-year contract that we had told you about.
That's right.
With respect to the brass in the building in Place Belle, John Sedgwick, of course, he's the assistant GM of the Canadiens and GM of Laval Rocket. That's not news. Jeff Gorton's rarely at Place Belle, but was there this week. But remember, in their end of season availabilities, they said that they would be keeping a close eye on the prospects, and Jeff Gorton was on Wednesday night for sure.
Definitely. More on that coming up in just a couple of minutes, so stick around. The Trois-Rivières Lions in the ECHL, they are also still knee-deep in their playoff run. In fact, in the Kelly Cup playoffs, for the first time in franchise history, Trois-Rivières is the Eastern Conference champion, and they have gotten themselves into the Kelly Cup final. They're going to take on the Toledo Walleye, and their game 1 is actually today, May 31st. They start in Toledo, and that would be the Trois-Rivières Lions competing in the big last best-of-7 series to raise the Kelly Cup, and it all starts today.
Toledo Walleye are the ECHL affiliate of the Detroit Red Wings. As you said, that's a 7-game series starting in Toledo, so that 2-3-2 format, games 3, 4, and 5 in Quebec.
That's right. And of course, as always, a stick tap to our friend and colleague Chris G, who does our week-to-week very in-depth coverage of Laval and Trois-Rivières. Be sure you head over to our written content on hockeyhotstove.com, tap on the Canadiens icon, and you can always get an update from him on what's going on with those teams. Just some hockey notes before we take our first break here on the show. The Stanley Cup Final is set. I also think, like, do we need to wait a whole week to get this started? It doesn't start until Wednesday, even though it's been a couple of days since the conference finals were finished. But it will be a rematch of last year, the Florida Panthers versus the Edmonton Oilers.
And we remember what happened. Florida went up 3-0. Edmonton tied it. And then Florida won last year's Stanley Cup. So a repeat of last year's finalists. I think that Edmonton, the differences, I guess, if you want to call it that, the differences are Edmonton is a much better team. Although Florida is a much better team this year. I guess the difference is that Edmonton has home ice advantage this year. Trying to make a prediction. My goodness, it's.
Let me just add one other thing there. Did you notice that Edmonton did something a little different this year? They touched the.
Yeah, they did.
They touched the trophy this year. They did not touch the conference winning trophy last year, as most teams typically don't out of superstition. And we all know, as you just said, how their Stanley Cup final run went. And so this year, I guess they're trying something new. And Connor McDavid picked it right up.
In contrast, let me see if I got this right. Florida, this is their third straight trip to the Stanley Cup final. And at some point, we're going to talk about this whole silly nonsense evening the tax business out. But anyway, the last 3 years, they've been to the Stanley Cup final. The first year, I believe they touched the trophy.
They did, and they lost.
Last year, they did not touch it. They won. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And they did not touch it again this year,
right,
which is so important, I guess. So we'll see who's right on that. Who do you have? Who do you have for a Stanley Cup champion? Stanley Cup champion really and a Conn Smythe winner.
It's really hard. I think this is one of those things where I think Florida will probably do it again, but I'm gonna say Edmonton because I think they can't go through what they went through last year. I think that defeat was so devastating to them last year that I think they've got to find a way. They have to find a way. And they handled Dallas pretty easily, which I think works in their favor as well, particularly given how strong of a team Dallas has been. So I'm going to go Edmonton. I'm going to say it's going to be Edmonton. And so Conn Smythe, if I'm going to say Edmonton's going to win it, then I'm going to say that Connor McDavid's going to be the Conn Smythe winner.
Yeah. And we remember you talking about last year. Remember those behind the scenes locker room, Connor McDavid not happy. And yeah, so they have home ice advantage. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. The only issue there is, and it's a big issue, Zach Hyman not available in the final for the rest of the season. That's big. And
goaltending.
Yeah, I can it hold up? Stuart Skinner's been great lately, but can he continue? You keep waiting for him for him to fail, and he hasn't lately. But can that continue? I don't know. And Florida is just built for these playoffs.
Yeah,
you just got to admire what they've built. Bill Zito, Paul Maurice, the coaching experience that they have on the bench, the leadership that they have. I'm going to take Florida, although it's very, very close. And I could go either way on this. So I'll take Florida in 7 games. with Sergei Bobrovsky as the Conn Smythe winner.
And I would be if Florida won again. I'd be happy for them about that. I'd certainly be happy for Paul Maurice. I'd definitely be happy for Sylvain Lefebvre to get a second consecutive cup as an assistant coach. But the other reason I went Edmonton is I'd like to see a Canadian team win the cup.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
I'd really like to see the cup come back to Canada. We'll see. All starts on Wednesday. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be an intense series. There's a lot of unfinished business between those two teams that's going to get taken care of starting next week. The Seattle Kraken have a new head coach. Remember, they parted ways with Dan Bylsma at the end of the season. Well, they have named Lane Lambert as their new head coach.
Yeah. Lane Lambert was this past season an associate coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs, worked with Craig Berube. He has head coaching experience with the Islanders. And so congratulations to Lane Lambert. And that leaves just Boston and Pittsburgh still looking for head coaches.
That's absolutely right. Jarmo Kekalainen, no longer on the open market. The Buffalo Sabres have snapped him up as a senior advisor. It was announced on Friday. You'll remember he was the GM for the Blue Jackets for, over 10 years, from 2013 to 2024. And he's going to be reporting to Kevin Adams, the Sabres general manager.
He's a smart guy, a very smart guy. We've talked to him before, and he maybe is better suited for not being the front face. He was kind of under the radar there in Columbus, but had some difficult issues to deal with. I see him probably, he's a good hockey guy, maybe not a good, come to the microphone kind of guy. So this might be a role he's better suited for, and the Sabres certainly need to do something.
Yeah, they do.
They haven't made the Stanley Cup playoffs in 14 years, and that currently the longest drought in the NHL.
Well, Jarmo is a good hire, so we'll see what kind of a difference he can make. Finally, the Hockey Hall of Fame will meet on the 24th of June to decide the inductees for the Hall for this year. And who is available for the first time when they do meet for those discussions? Well, that would be Carey Price. And so the big question is, will they induct Carey Price into the Hockey Hall of Fame in his first year of eligibility? And I say, if they don't, then they are insane.
Yeah, I don't think this should be a debate at all. If you look at his accomplishments and leave the nonsense about no Stanley Cup, it's not a trophy you can win on your own.
No.
Price won a Hart, won a Vezina, won a Lindsay, won a Masterton. He has a World Junior gold. He has a World Cup gold. He has an Olympic gold. Lots of accomplishments, but I thought if you want to sum it up as a great reason, it was Paul Byron this past week that was asked if Price should be part of the 2025 class for the Hockey Hall of Fame, and Paul Byron said, look at his records with the Canadiens, and then look at Ken Dryden, Patrick Roy, Jacques Plante, Georges Vezina. They're all in the Hall of Fame. And when you look at the stats, you see Carey's name ahead of him, ahead of all of them. That's a sign he deserves his place in the Hall. Absolutely. Look in the Canadiens record books. You see Dryden, Roy, Plante, Vezina. Carey holds the records ahead of those guys. Carey was the best player, not goaltender, best player in the NHL for a good long time, and absolutely deserves to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yes, he does. Do the thing, people. Do the thing. All right, we are going to take our first break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. Coming up next, we have a brand new message from our sponsors over at DraftKings. It's brand new this week with a new incentive. So You don't want to miss that. You're definitely going to check that out. Big thanks to our sponsors over at DraftKings. And when we come back on the other side, we have a very special guest joining us in the studio to talk about which Habs prospect is the one to watch in Laval this postseason, which one looks like he's got a lot of potential, and what is happening with Laval in their Eastern Conference final. We are going to cover all of that and more when we come back right after this. So stay with us. You are listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
It's officially the best time of year for Hoops fans. Playoff drama, buzzer beaters, all the chaos we live for. And if you're done just watching and ready to actually win some cash, well, you got to check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25 times your cash. And if you beat your competition, you could be looking at a 500 times bag in your pocket. It's super simple. Select your picks, track your score, and go for those big-time prizes. No gimmicks, just straight-up fun. Pick 6 is live in most states like Missouri, Cali, Texas, Georgia, and plenty more. So yeah, don't settle for weak payouts. Make your picks with Pick 6 and let your basketball brain pay off. New to DraftKings Pick 6? New customers toss in just $5 on your first entry, and you'll get $50 in bonus picks instantly. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code THPN. That's code THPN to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio. Once again, I am your host, Amy Johnson. If you'd like to follow me on social media, you can find me on X at Flyers Rule. And of course, with me in the studio, my co-host, our president and founder here at Rocket Sports, Rick Stevens. You definitely want to be following him on X at Rocket Sports. That is the central account for all of our content, all of our news, all of our updates about the Canadiens and their prospects. So that is definitely a place you want to go and follow. And don't forget, if you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button, whether you're listening to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform or if you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe. If you're on YouTube, tap the notification bell. You do not want to miss an episode. We will be here all summer long, and I've mentioned a couple times we have an exclusive interview coming for you today. Those exclusive interviews will continue to ramp up as we continue towards draft day, as we do every single year, where we'll have a lot of really top-notch insiders and analysts joining us here on the show. So you're not going to want to miss any of those. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. So in case you haven't been paying attention to the AHL, the Laval Rocket were the regular season champions in the AHL this season, earning themselves the McGregor-Kilpatrick Trophy. That is the trophy that is awarded like the President's Trophy for the NHL. The McGregor-Kilpatrick is the one that you get in the American Hockey League. Recorded a league best record of 47-19-3-2, 99 points, home ice advantage for the entirety of the 2025 Calder Cup playoffs. They were a juggernaut this year in the American Hockey League, all guided by first-year head coach Pascal Vincent. And Rick, really, it's been kind of like the perfect storm of coaching and the mix that Vincent had to work with in the roster that got them where they're at right now?
Yeah, the question in the AHL is typically, do you want development or do you want to win? Somehow, under the guidance of Pascal Vincent, the Laval Rocket have done both. There's been great development by a really good young bunch of skilled prospects, as well as the right veterans who aren't necessary, who are playing for the Laval Rocket. They're not playing for a call up. So it's all been a perfect, certainly during the regular season, a perfect set of circumstances for the Laval Rocket.
It has been, and so. Marching through their way to the Eastern Conference Finals, of course, being the top team in the AHL meant they got a bye in the play-in round. They didn't have to participate in that, and then they easily dispatched the Cleveland Monsters. Had a little bit of a challenge from the Rochester Americans, but took care of them as well. Well, the premier AHL league-wide beat writer, who is known for his in-depth coverage and exceptional features on teams and players all across the American Hockey League, is none other than Patrick Williams. His work appears on NHL.com, where he is the AHL correspondent for NHL.com. He is the leading correspondent and features writer for the AHL's official site. That's at theahl.com. He also writes regularly for Flow Sports, which is the broadcaster of AHL hockey this year. And he appears regularly on NHL Network Radio on Sirius XM. Patrick is also a frequent contributor to the Canadiens Connection podcast. He is a wonderful part of the Rocket Sports Media family. We're so proud to have him as a teammate. And so we caught up with Patrick just recently to talk to him about which Rocket players have really caught his eye during the playoffs. And what we really wanted to know on top of that is what he thinks the chances are of seeing Pascal Vincent in the NHL next season, plus just how the Laval Rocket got to where they are in the Eastern Conference Finals, and giving us a little bit of background on their current opponent that they have to surpass in order to get to the Calder Cup Finals. So without further ado, it is a very exciting day here on the Canadiens Connection podcast, not just because it's the last day of May, but because we have a very special guest today, one who is far too long overdue in returning to the show, our very dear friend and colleague, Patrick Williams. Rick likes to call him the AHL guru because he knows all, and the Angels always welcome him back to the show. He knows everything there is to know about the American Hockey League, and he is joining us today to talk about the Eastern Conference Final and your Laval Rocket. Patrick, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's good to hear the Angels again. I just out of their slumber.
Yeah.
They're well rested.
It's a tradition.
Yes.
So we are already 2 games into the Eastern Conference Finals. Laval facing off against the Charlotte Checkers, whom they did not play in the regular season. It's been many regular seasons since they have faced off against the Charlotte Checkers. And, leading into all of this, throughout the season, it was pretty well expected that the Rocket would enjoy a long playoff run. And they've gotten through their 2 best of 5 series, which is very different from the NHL playoff setup. But now at least there's something similar between the NHL and the AHL playoff at this stage in the conference final, is that it's a best of 7. The odd thing is that it's a 2-3-2. So the first 2 games were at home in Laval. They go to Charlotte for 3 games if necessary, and then game 6 and 7 would be back in Laval again. Despite all of the success and the kind of ease through which they made it through the regular season, taking top honors in the league in the regular season, here they are down 2-0 in the Eastern Conference Final, losing 2 games at home. And now they go to Columbus, where Columbus only needs to win 2 of the 3 consecutive.
Charlotte, yeah.
It's Charlotte, not Columbus. only needs to win 2 of their 3 consecutive home games in order to take the series and advance to the final. So, Patrick, I guess first let's just talk about here they are, and here's the hole that they've suddenly dug themselves into, as Rick was saying even before the show. Place Bell is supposed to be an intimidating place for people to come to play, and not only did Rochester put up a big win there in the last series when they were trying to stave off elimination, but Charlotte has come in and just stomped all over the Rocket on home ice.
Yeah, it's funny how fast things change, right? Last Sunday afternoon, Laval's kind of living the high life there. They beat Rochester 5-0 in that series clinching win. Everything's looking great. They're feeling good, and then it's kind of that record scratch moment. Charlotte rolls into town, thumps them in game 1, 5-1. Same thing in game 2. More of the same. Kind of all the little church of the trade that the Rocket were up to against Rochester and Cleveland earlier in the playoffs no longer are working, right? Like, getting under team skin, that quick counter strike approach, that's, really aggressive hunting the puck approach. Well, they found a team that's able to do it as well, if not better. Getting under the skin of a goalie, maybe that works well with the younger goalie that you're facing, but you got a guy like Capo Kakin, and he's played 140 NHL games. Just his demeanor in general is very cool, calm, and collect, and nothing seems to be working. And you can see now that frustration's bubbling over, right? Last 2 games now that kind of have had, kind of a sloppy, start, and then just kind of really degenerated from there for the Rocket. And then you see the frustration, late in the game, the scrums and all that. That looks like a team that just, is having a hard time now, as that's, that pressure and that kind of the higher stakes really come down to bear on them here in this conference final.
And it's looked like they've been a different team, not only in this series, but a different team in the playoffs. Laval, as Amy mentioned, was first overall in the AHL this season. And I guess I wonder about the history of success of the overall regular season champion, if we can touch on that. But as far as Laval, they were dominating at home. They lost just 12 games at home throughout the regular season. But right now they have a losing record at Place Bell. They're 3-4 at home. Overall, they're just 6-5, whereas Charlotte, comes in at 8-2. Charlotte's been on a roll. They have, I think they only had 1 loss in regulation throughout the playoffs. And Laval has just been kind of a mediocre kind of team through the playoffs. They've gotten through, and you expect them to get through, but they haven't looked like the same dominant team. And as you said, they haven't, all the intimidation, whether it's physically or whether it's the crowd noise or they just look a bit different. I guess the last piece for me, I see one prospect in among the forwards. I see one prospect in their top 9, one Canadiens prospect in their top 9, that being Sean Farrell. I guess there's 2 because Kapanen's been the second line. But in the regular season, I remember when you were here on a last visit, you said it's the young players, it's the prospects who are driving the bus. And it seems different. And I don't know if that's a deployment issue, whether what it is, but the whole team seems just a little bit off in these playoffs.
Well, I agree. And the thing with the AHL that's different is, in the NHL, you have your team in the regular season. It's pretty much the same team in the playoffs, right? and as we all know in the AHL, your team from one night to the next in the regular season, is your roster is all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And so the playoffs are kind of the first time in the entire season when things start to stabilize. This is true of any AHL team, right? Like you're not having call ups every other day. You're not bringing people in and out of the lineup. You're not, obviously dealing with the NHL team's needs in most cases. Although Charlotte's still has Florida alive in the playoffs, although that really hasn't had any effect on them. But so you're able, I think, to get maybe more of a true picture, right, of kind of what every team has exactly, because you can get some stability in your lines for more than a game or two. All of your deep pairings, and then you also just ever really have a chance to kind of drill down on your opponent, and whatever their given weaknesses and strengths may be, and the way the AHL regular season is, that's just not possible, right? When you're playing 3 games in 4 nights and that kind of thing, or 3-3s, it's just kind of get off the bus and play the game, and that's that. Whereas now you're giving a team like Charlotte, they had a long time to prepare for Laval, and I mean, they also had to account for the possibility that Rochester would win, but they were able to really hone in on them, and so it's different. Like like I think that's something that as a lot of NHL fans maybe don't pick up on, but
Right.
it's kind of a really different dynamic here in the playoffs, and just veterans, like you look at Charlotte, they have some older players, guys that have won Calder Cups, Kyle Kraskulo, Trevor Carrick, like I mentioned, Kokkonen is playing the NHL a bunch, so they're not necessarily going to be intimidated by a building like Place Bell, like maybe some younger players, like with let's say Rochester might be. So they're able to kind of take all that in stride and kind of like let that roll off their back, and that's the predicament now. That's I think the Rocket find themselves in. They did also just they I sort of touched on this earlier. They came right off that emotional series with Rochester, division rival, and day off Monday, practice day Tuesday, and it was right into it on Wednesday, which is more typical, obviously, in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But in the AHL, typically you go from one round and you have a week or so to kind of come off that one series, start to gear up for the next series, and they didn't have that opportunity this time. I mean, partially because they went the distance, and whereas Charlotte was able to get a sweep, they bought themselves some extra time to kind of really have some downtime, and so and I think people have also underestimated Charlotte all season. I've talked to different coaches, and not coaches so much, but more people around the league, and Charlotte repeatedly came up as a team that, hey, these guys are really good. They're kind of under the radar a little bit. They're not a super flashy team, but they're extremely well coached, extremely well structured, really strong veteran base. And I think a lot of that comes, a lot of that is revealed, through their penalty kill, for example, right? Like they have, they had 16 shorthanded goals in the regular season, most in the league, top ranked penalty kill. And I always feel like the penalty kill is a real good reflection of a team's coaching staff and its kind of its attention to detail. Whereas, a lot of times, power play is more skill based. Penalty kill, a lot of that is just attention to detail and having a really good structure and sticking to it. And, that I think bears out with what Charlotte's been able to do shorthanded. And then they have that speed that, we saw that last night. Logan Mailloux comes into the offensive zone, kind of fumbles the puck, and puck goes right the other way. And before you know it, it's in the back of your net, and that was a real crushing goal for Laval. So yeah, this is a really good Charlotte team, and they're put through the test too a lot. With their schedule, like they have a lot of those like 6-game road trips. They'll come home for 6, go on the road for 6, just because of their location, and so they're pretty well tested. And this is a team that's I don't think it's. I've said that they're the AHL version of the Florida Panthers, minus some of the kind of the hijinks. And I think that's really so far kind of been borne out now through the first 2 games.
So one of the things that's always key in a series is in any series, playoff series, is goaltending. And we've seen Pascal Vincent, for the most part, has rotated goaltenders between Caden Primo and Jacob Fowler. They've played, I guess, Primo's played 60 more minutes, and that's primarily because he's got the start in the last 2 games. Seems like the rotation is out the window. Fowler has the better numbers. Primo had a sensational regular season, has looked kind of average, although hard to blame him when the team around him has been real suspect throughout the playoffs. But what do you think of oftentimes the thinking is give it to a goalie and let him run with it until he fails in the playoffs. But there's been, up until now, this rotation with the Laval Rocket goaltending, and how have you seen that all play out?
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day, and I wondered, would it have been different if you didn't have that first round with the Habs where Primo gets called up, Fowler's kind of pushed into action in the Cleveland series, does pretty well to start, kind of shows that he can handle the playoffs. And then Primo comes back, but then you have a guy coming back who, won 21 out of 26 appearances. And so you kind of have to give him his shot too. And then it's almost like they kind of got pressed into this back and forth, and a back and forth even when the schedule didn't necessarily call for it. You look at Wednesday and Thursday of this series, you would have thought that maybe that was where you would go one night and the other on the other night. Well, then they go with Primo on both nights, but then Primo struggles, and then the whole thing just sort of, it seemed like it got off track. And I know there was a lot of pressure, maybe externally. Okay, Fowler's coming in; he's had this great college performance at Boston College. He's a top prospect. He's this, he's that. He comes in, he does well. Primo's, the guy that's, struggled in the first half with the Habs, gets sent down, is 25 years old, is not viewed as, somebody with a long-term future, with the Habs. And so I wonder how much of that just got off track from maybe what your original plan would have been, a month ago, before kind of all that chain of events got set in motion. And, and I do wonder, sure, it's development, but, come playoff time, it's really about winning, right? Like, you've had 6.5 months for development time. Now, you kind of owe it to your team, all the other players that are trying to advance their own performance too, to kind of put your best, foot forward. And, I found it difficult to justify going away from Primo. And I just wonder how much of that, neither goalie's been able to get into a great rhythm. And yeah, I just, I don't know. It seems like, I don't want to say that, they outsmarted themselves, but maybe just, the whole sort of original plan, because of everything that happened, kind of went off track a little bit. And now now you have both goalies that are kind of struggling. And, now where do you go, right? So like, all right, so now what do you do? You go to Fowler and you say, hey, Fowler, save our season, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of a complicated situation. And I think you think about too, right? Like, so now like the Habs are out of the playoffs. So now the media up there in Montreal is solely focused on what's going on with the Rocket. And so it's that much more attention being put on everything. And, I don't think that's ideal for anybody, certainly at the AHL level in terms of development, to have that kind of all of a sudden outside noise, and I know teams will say, okay, we block all that out. I mean, yeah, maybe they do to a certain extent, but I mean, they're human too, right? So I think, it's there's only so much you can block out when there's that kind of noise. And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things like, you could probably what if yourself, from now till the end of eternity, but it is something I think that's worth thinking about, and wondering, was this the right approach or not? I mean, I don't know. They won 2 rounds, so like it's hard to quibble too much.
Well, yeah, and that's just
And
it.
maybe they just like run into a really good team, right? Like maybe, this is a thing where, it wouldn't matter who they were starting, and when you look at some of the puck mistakes in front of them, either goalie, it's hard to pin it all on the goaltending, right? Like, I mean, there's been some real defensive breakdowns, and Charlotte does that. I mean, I saw, what they did to Providence was, I mean, incredible. I mean, it was a deciding game in the series. They held them to 8 shots the entire game, and Providence is a good team. Like, Providence is a really good team, and they had no answer. And then they play Hershey. Sure, the narrative that Hershey was kind of worn out, that has some truth to it, but this was a team that finished second overall in the AHL. Certainly had enough of their players that have been, Calder Cup champions before, and Charlotte completely controlled that series for pretty much start to finish. And so Charlotte can make any team not look great. And so it's maybe a little bit of this and a little bit of that in terms of why the Rocket now find themselves down 2-0 and having, go, this is a tall order now. Now you have to, essentially, if you think about it, you have to win 4 of your next 5 with 3 of them down in Charlotte. And that's not looking great if you're the Laval Rocket right now.
And I think that yeah, it's a tough test for the goaltenders. And as you were kind of alluding to, I think there's competing priorities there. The decisions may not be made locally, to put it one way.
Yes.
And that's really difficult for Jacob Fowler, putting all that pressure on him, as you said, and difficult for Caden Primo, as he has maybe one eye on his future and where might that be. And there was a shot once Primo was pulled last night and he was on the bench and Fowler replaced him. There was a TV timeout and there was a shot of Primo that he looked, and he's a goaltender that can get in his own head anyway, but he just looked absolutely destroyed. He had this empty stare,
like shell shock.
Absolutely. And you could almost see all these now what happens, not only in this series, but for his future. And he might have to take that into Game 3, or the inexperienced rookie just out of college, Fowler, has to go in, and it's a tough situation.
I think it will be good for them to get out of that fishbowl environment for a bit. You go down to Charlotte, it's a kind of completely different atmosphere in terms of the circus. Laval's the only place in the league where you actually have like a media circus at times, and it's a different dynamic. I mean, and you're putting these players that are not really accustomed to that. All of a sudden now they have this horde of media showing up, and Media's trying to fill time now because the Habs are done and there's not much else going on, and so now you get away from it all. You lose a lot of that media circus around you. Go down to Charlotte, nice place to be. Um, More low key environment. Get away from all that, and like I'm not saying that that's going to be the salvation for them, but I do think it might help them. I thought they were much better on the road. Both against Cleveland and Rochester. Again, where you're not having to deal with that external circus that's kind of around you, and to some extent, like even just like we talk about the Plus Bell factor, and it's true, but I mean that can also work against the home team too, right? I mean, in terms of um, just that's just a lot of intensity, a lot of pressure for young players, and like who aren't necessarily completely accustomed to that. So you go down to Charlotte, it's a much more kind of calm environment, and maybe you get away from that and reset, and the team can kind of close ranks around themselves and see if that works. And hey, if you can pull out 2 wins down there, right? Like you come back, you're down 3-2, and you have a shot, and maybe that's what you have to aim for at that point. But this is definitely going to be a tall order. Rochester was really good. Cleveland. I thought Cleveland had a lot more potential, but then Matejchuk goes down in that game 3, and that kind of took the wind out of their sails. But Charlotte's kind of a whole different beast altogether. But stranger things have happened in this league for sure, as we have all seen. So we'll see. We'll see where this thing goes right now.
One element that has certainly become more and more of a factor, and it's not something that the Laval Rocket is unfamiliar with throughout the season. They were quite cozy in the penalty box all season long.
Yes, they were.
And Rick, I know you've actually been speaking prior to recording over the last day or so about how this was their discipline or lack thereof, even throughout the regular season, was something Pascal Vincent was asked about, and you always kind of remind us about the times that Pascal Vincent has said, yeah, but that's it's a little bit of their identity. I don't want to mess. They're in a groove. I don't want to have them thinking twice about things by trying to pull the reins a little bit, that type of thing. But we're in a situation now where the Rocket, over the last 3 games consecutively, have had over 100 penalty minutes every night. I mean, it seems like it feels like for me that's the only thing now that they don't know what else to do. That's the only thing that they're falling back on, and I don't know that that's going to be a recipe for success.
No, and I think the biggest thing is to it's one thing if you pile out the penalty minutes at the end of the game, and that's just kind of where you're collecting on some debts and that sort of thing. But if you're getting into shorthanded trouble early on, in games, like we saw in the first period, just getting into that kind of not only penalty trouble, but then also getting into the 4-on-4 situations, that kind of thing. That's you're disrupting a lot of aspects of your team, not the least of which is rotating your lines and that sort of thing. But then it's also 4-on-4 play that can benefit Charlotte. So that I think that's I agree, that's a major issue in terms of keeping your composure, and sure, a lot of those penalty minutes, the last 2 nights, a good portion of them came at the end of the game where, they're just, 10 minute misconducts and stuff. So whatever. But those early penalties, are definitely an issue they have to clean up because, they don't have a good enough penalty kill to withstand that, right? Like, if you're Charlotte and you take a penalty, okay, no problem. You might even score. But like if you don't have a dynamic penalty kill, like you've got to be a lot more mindful of that. And I think they've run into a team that is more than willing to kind of push back and swat back and and draw them into penalties themselves. And they need to smarten up because even if you manage to kind of get out of harm's way in terms of killing off penalties, it's just completely throwing off your player usage and just there's no rhythm, there's no flow. And as we've seen on back-to-back nights, Charlotte if you fall behind against Charlotte, you can pretty much, let's be honest, you can pretty much kiss that game goodbye because you're not coming back. So when you go down 3-0, 4-0, you can pretty much turn out the lights. And at that point, then you're right. Like Laval's left. Okay, well now what do we do? All right, well we'll mix it up. We'll try to, I guess do something, but we don't have any other answers, so we'll just kind of get into these scrums at the end of the game, which maybe it makes you feel good, but it doesn't tend to accomplish a whole lot either. So that's where we're at right now, and it hasn't really been beneficial for certainly for the Rocket. And at this time of the year too, right? Like like a lot of those scrums, like those 10-minute misconducts are being handed out. Like I don't think in normal times would that, but at this time of the year, the officials are just like we're going to err on the side of caution and just start tossing players like that. So it's just it's not great. Like they're definitely I don't want to sort of downplay the trouble that they're in a lot of trouble. There's no two ways about that, and they're definitely gonna have to change some of their approach. And as much as anything, they're going to have to change that discipline because, like you said, that was an issue during the year. And I completely get what Vincent's saying. I think there's a lot of merit to that, but there is that line where is it, now it's really starting to hurt you too. So it's something they have to clean up before Sunday. That's for sure.
Well, scrums at the end of the game or scrums at the beginning of the game, maybe they can start there cleaning it up, as we saw a bit of a dust up in pregame on game 2.
Some of that for the game.
You said you can understand Pascal Vincent. Let's focus on him a little bit. I think that in general, with respect to the regular season, the reviews on him have been, he's done an exceptional job. Typically, we've talked about the AHL almost making a choice between development or winning. Somehow, Pascal Vincent has been able to do both. He's done a wonderful job developing the young players and providing opportunities for the young players in key moments during games. But also, he coached his team to be the best in the regular season, and so it's not surprising that there are some vacancies in the NHL. He does have some experience at the NHL level. Mm-hmm. That there might be teams that come knocking on his door at the end of the season, and I think in his media availability, Kent Hughes acknowledged that. He said he would leave that to Pascal Vincent. Pascal Vincent was asked about it and said, if somebody I'm paraphrasing, but said, if somebody really wants me, I think they'll wait a couple of weeks until my season's over. And in a podcast on the Canadiens Connection podcast, I said that he's probably a member of Laval Rocket that the Canadiens either have to promote to the big club or lose. What's your outlook on Pascal Vincent's future?
Yeah, I think he has. I think he has a chance to get another shot. He may need maybe another year with Laval. Like I think that that season in Columbus. I don't think it was his fault, but
Right.
he took a lot of heat for for that, and I think as it turns out, I think it was a really good move on his part to go down to Laval and kind of reset and maybe reset his reputation a bit and show that he is a good coach um, and that he certainly has a lot to offer, and we certainly have seen that. He's obviously he won Coach of the Year. He did something right, so and it's also too like finding the right fit. Like, do you want to go in like he's probably not going to Boston right now. Like that's a team that's sort of in a little bit of disarray, and then Pittsburgh is obviously a team where there's a lot of work to do, and so you want to find the right situation too, right? So that you're not in a year or two kind of finding yourself back in the same spot you are now. Um, so yeah, I think for him, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for him to come back for another year or two in Laval. You're certainly going to get it's one of the most high profile jobs, such as it is at the AHL level. And so, if you do a good job there, which he has, I think you can definitely stay on a lot of radars. So I think, that's kind of where things stand for him. There's just, it's really hard, as we've seen, for AHL coaches to break through and get a shot. Spencer Carberry is, kind of the most recent example, but there are a lot of really solid top coaches down in the league right now that if anything are not just right, but are probably past that stage almost, if that makes sense. And you look at like a Neil Graham, Texas, Carl Taylor, Milwaukee, obviously Todd Nelson and Hershey, just so on and so forth. A lot of coaches doing really good work, but as we've seen, the NHL tends to want to stick with the more kind of like the tried and true names. So,
Mm-hmm.
So for a guy like Vincent, he's kind of in that same boat where he's trying to get another shot, but it's not necessarily easy. You look at like Nelson, like I said, like, he had that little intern stint with Edmonton. That was 10 years ago. He's won 3 Calder Cups since then, and he hasn't got back. So, it's really tough to kind of break through that wall. So I think that's where Vincent stands right now.
So you mentioned about coaches getting a shot in the NHL. Before we let you go, let me ask you one last question, and that's about players getting a shot in the NHL. And if we can focus a bit on Canadiens prospects in Laval, I just wonder, and there's lots of them, whether it be Kapanen or Farrell or Xhekaj, who have been talked about, or Reinbacher, Mayu on the back end. Who have you really enjoyed of the Canadiens prospects in Laval? Who have you really enjoyed watching in the playoffs, and you think has been consistently putting in a NHL potential quality effort?
One player, like right off the bat, I would say has been Engstrom on the back end there. Like, he's kind of quiet. Like, obviously, he's not getting the same level of hype as Mayu and Reinbacher. Understandably so. Like, they're the first round picks and all that. But I find that he does a pretty steady job on the back end, and that's as we all know, like that's sometimes one of the best things you can say about defensemen is if you don't notice them a whole lot in terms of there's not a lot of misadventures and that sort of thing. Lucas Condotta too, right? Like I know he's a little bit under the radar, but like I think in his own way, like he plays kind of a real diligent game two-way. I know other coaches have been impressed by him. What they've seen going up against him. Obviously, I don't think he's somebody that's going to be, going up to the NHL and, being a top 6 player. But, I don't think you can ever have too much of those kind of those depth guys. And so I think
gritty game too.
Yeah. I think he's definitely played himself, into, a little bit more consideration for more NHL work. So those are kind of like right off the bat, those two guys, like like you said, Farrell, Kapanen, the two first round defensemen, like certainly are going to get a lot of attention. But those two guys that I mentioned also, like, kind of quietly have, I think, done a really good job. Both earlier, but certainly now in the postseason as well.
Well, we cannot thank you enough for coming and sharing your wealth of knowledge about the AHL in general. We know if we need to talk about the AHL, it is Patrick Williams who we have to tap for a segment on the show. It has been wonderful catching up with you. It has been wonderful hearing from you. This is going to be such an intense series. There is a lot on the line now as the series shifts to Charlotte. And hopefully, if all goes well, if Laval does pull out the improbable or the tall order, as you say, then maybe when they advance to the Calder Cup final, we can have you back to discuss that setup. Hopefully that's what we'll be talking about.
That sounds like a plan. And we'll see, like, as I said, this late, especially, you never know, right? Like, things, like we said, like, last Sunday, everything was looking great for Laval. Now, now they're in trouble, but it could swing back the other way just as quickly. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
If you are not doing so already, you can follow Patrick on X at PWilliamsAHL. You can also read his written content on the AHL's official website, theahl.com, or over on Flow Hockey. And Patrick, thank you so much again for being with us. It was great catching up with you, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, that was great. It's always good to talk to Patrick Williams about hockey, but particularly about the AHL and Laval Rocket. Laval Rocket in a bit of a pickle right now. Mm-hmm. I'd say that they've lost their swagger. They need to sharpen their focus because Charlotte is a tough opponent. They're an affiliate of the Florida Panthers. They play the same style as the Florida Panthers, very aggressive, very relentless, and they're heading down. The Rocket are, as we speak, actually. They're flying down to Charlotte to take on the Checkers for the next potentially the next 3 games.
And Game 3 starts on Sunday. We mentioned Patrick mentioned some players, who really stand out for Charlotte. One that we didn't mention that many people might not know if they don't follow the AHL regularly. That is where Jesse Puljujarvi is playing right now as well.
In Charlotte, yeah.
He is playing for the Charlotte Checkers and is certainly a factor to contend with in these playoffs. So when we say that Charlotte is a pretty tough team, yes, they've got a lot of great talent on that team. So this will be a tall task for Laval. They're going to need a lot of support to get them through these next 3 games. So all of that being said, our Canadiens Connection question of the week, the fan question that we're asking to you that we want to hear your responses to. First of all, we just love to hear the kind of the pulse of the fans of what you think. And also we want to get, some really great responses to read to all of our listeners on next week's show. So our question for you this week is, which Laval Rocket prospect do you think has impressed the most this postseason and why? You heard a couple of options that Patrick Williams, the AHL expert who has watched all of these games and watches games all season long from every team around the league. So he has a good indication of which players on each team, if they're rookie or veteran or if they're prospect or not, and how they're performing. You heard who he pointed out, but which Laval prospect do you think has impressed the most this postseason? And let us know why you feel that way. You can, of course, send that response in on the Rocket Sports text line. That's 585-3-ROCKET. Or you can drop a comment on our YouTube channel or hit us up on social media at Habs Connection on X, Facebook, or Instagram. Can't wait to hear what you have to say. You all had a lot to say about last week's question of the week, and we have got a bunch of those responses to read for you coming up right after this. We're going to take one last break here on the podcast, hear from our sponsors over at DraftKings, and then, yes, on the other side, we're reading your answers to last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. You don't want to miss it, so stick with us. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
It's officially the best time of year for hoops fans. Playoff drama, buzzer beaters, all the chaos we live for. And if you're done just watching and ready to actually win some cash, well, you got to check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25 times your cash. And if you beat your competition, you could be looking at a 500 times bag in your pocket. It's super simple. Select your picks, track your score, and go for those big-time prizes. No gimmicks, just straight-up fun. Pick 6 is live in most states like Missouri, Cali, Texas, Georgia, and plenty more. So yeah, don't settle for weak payouts. Make your picks with Pick 6 and let your basketball brain pay off. New to DraftKings Pick 6? New customers toss in just $5 on your first entry, and you'll get $50 in bonus picks instantly. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code THPN. That's code THPN to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Welcome back once more to episode 350 of the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. We certainly hope you've been enjoying today's episode. If you have and you are a newer listener or watcher, please go ahead and tap that subscribe button, hit the like button, share this podcast if you're enjoying it. We want to spread the word far and wide to Habs fans all over the globe that we are here in the off season, we are here in the regular season, we're here in the preseason, we're here in the postseason. Whatever the season, we are here. We're going to be here all summer, and we'd love for your Habs friends to join us on that journey. The Canadiens Connection question of the week last week. This week, don't forget, we want to hear your answers to which Laval prospect you think has impressed the most in the playoffs this postseason, and why you feel that way. So don't forget, just send us a text, 585-3-ROCKET, or drop us a comment on YouTube or social media. Last week we did one of our mailbag episodes where we answered a bunch of questions that people have sent in on our text line or on YouTube or on social media. And one of those was about Kirby Dach and whether or not he can reach his potential, if there's anything left in the tank, if there's anything there to help him really succeed. And so we asked you last week, what is your take on Kirby Dach? Is he capable of reaching his potential, or do the Habs need to look at other options for a top 6 forward? And this was apparently a hot button topic because we got a slew of responses. And so we picked out quite a few of them because we had some really good answers. We picked out quite a few of them. And I think Rick is going to start with one that we got through email.
Yeah, and that's one of the ways that you can reach us via email, hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. Send your emails to hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. Dino did just that. And he said, big off season moves for our Habs. Transition, development, more transition, filling missing roles, draft well. Don't get carried away with trade temptations. Build from within. We have the talent and we have the potential. Need a little time. Be patient. Let's see how it goes. Take good care to all the folks at Rocket Sports. And that's from Dino. And we thank him for his email.
Absolutely. We also had a comment come in on X. Don't forget, follow us on X at Rocket Sports. And at Angelini95 on X said, Habs lack grit? Yes. And everyone is trying to trade Arbor Jacki. Go figure. I can't say I can argue with that. That is, Arbor Jacki is grit all day, every day.
You can add, I'll just make an editing note and add Mayu to that
Well,
list.
yeah.
And everyone is trying to trade Jacki and Mayu. Go figure.
Go figure. That absolutely. So thank you, at Angeline95. That's a great comment. Moving over to YouTube, we had a whole bunch of replies on YouTube. Rick, I'll let you start here.
This one comes from at Brendan Acoin on YouTube. He says, Patrick Laine for a top pick, $8 million towards Marner's salary. So a lot of positive moves coming up. Matheson, Dvorak, and possibly Jacki as trade bait. There's someone wanting to trade Jacki. Fowler adds a future more positive as well. Carrier, Mayu, and Reinbacher shore up a strong right side defense. And he had some, our folks talk to each other.
Yeah, they do.
And he had a couple of responses. Let's see here. To Brendan Acoin, this comes from, there's Slicky14 and Michael Mongoose. Slicky says Dvorak's a unrestricted free agent. They can't trade him unless they sign him fast. Sign and trade, that's not going to happen. And Michael said, no one wants Patrick Laine with that contract. We'll have to pay someone to take him. So a bit of back and forth there between our listeners on YouTube.
I like it. Chime in. Jump in if you want to get in on that conversation. Also on YouTube, at NotDead73 says, trade Lazy Doc ASAP way before Laine. And so I think he has definitively told us what his take on Kirby Dach is. And that is a perfectly reasonable opinion. Also seems someone else kind of on that train. At Jacob Perez 10 on YouTube says, if anyone is still considering if Dach is good, they're delusional. He hasn't deserved a roster spot even. So, okay.
So maybe that's directed at Gorton and Hughes.
Maybe. That's possible. And we also heard from at Center Heist 7948. He says, as far as Kirby Dach, I really like the kid, but I just don't see him fitting the top 6 center role. Really, it's a shame, but his injuries have set him back at least 2 years in development. I think he's got the talent, but lacking development, and that ship might have sailed. The positive is maybe third line potential while he's playing catch up. So I do believe they have to bring someone in. And as I said previously, they have to already be a proven top 6 player, not a reclamation project. And those have failed as we've seen with Dach and also with Newhook. Thanks for the great question. And he has a PS. He says, PS, you mentioned you wondered what my thoughts would be on the Habs getting Anton Lundell. Well, I'd love to have him on our team.
Ask a question, you get an answer.
That's right. See, sometimes we even ask our fans questions, and they're kind enough to answer. And so thank you to everyone. These were just some of the best ones, but thank you to everyone who sent in a comment or an answer to that question. Loved all of the response and the back and forth and the conversation. Keep it coming for this week. Remember, who is the Laval Rocket player Laval Rocket prospect, Montreal Canadiens prospect, playing for Laval that you think has impressed the most this postseason, and why? We can't wait to see what you've got lot to say about that. And we will be taking your best answers, and we will read them as part of our next Canadiens Connection podcast, which will take place next Saturday, June 7th. Say au revoir to May. 'Tis the last day of May today. June officially kicks off on Sunday, so it'll be June 7th for our next Canadiens Connection podcast. Can't wait to see you there. Enjoy the Calder Cup playoffs. Enjoy the Kelly Cup playoffs if you're watching those, and certainly enjoy the Stanley Cup final. And we'll see you back here again next Saturday. Thank you so much for listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.